Hello and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Bob Aber. I'm a member of the City Club Board of Directors, and it's my honor to welcome all of you to our debate between the candidates for Ohio's 16th Congressional District. In an election season when many incumbents have declined invitations to debate, we are heartened to see Republican Congressman Jim Renacci here to debate his challenger, Democratic Party candidate Pete Crossland. If you're not familiar with the 16th Congressional District, its heart seems to be in Wayne County, with one arm extending east to parts of Stark, Portage, and Summit counties, and another arm extending north through Medina County to western Cuyahoga County. In addition to the city of Worcester, it includes the population centers in Wadsworth, Medina, Canal Fulton, and Middleburg Heights. Here to help us negotiate the issues in the district is WKYC senior correspondent Tom Barris, who will review the format and rules and get things started. Thanks, Tom.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you here. Congressman Renacci, Mr. Crossland, we're hoping for a lively and provocative and thoughtful and enlightening and, yes, maybe sometimes a little passionate discussion here this afternoon. You can read about both of their illustrious careers. Mr. Renacci is mayor of Wadsworth and a very successful businessman, and Mr. Crossland is college professor, state lawmaker, and Summit County council person in your program. So we're going to do first, we're going to go over the ground rules for the proceedings here. Each candidate will get 3 minutes for an opening statement. Then we will spend 20 minutes on moderators' questions. And I would ask both candidates to be as specific as possible and, when possible, to compare and contrast their views with their opponents. When the question I ask is for both candidates, each will get 90 seconds to answer. If the question is to one specific candidate, that candidate will get 90 seconds, and the other candidate will get a 30-second response. Then we'll take a timeout for some City Club business, and when we come back, we will open it up for the best part, the grab bag, your thoughtful and off-the-wall questions. We have a couple of roving mic holders who are going to be working the crowd to get your thoughts. And just an advisory, no speeches, no rants, just questions, please. The same time allotment rules will prevail on those questions. And we will end with a final question from me in which each candidate will be able to also offer their walk-off thoughts. So the order of starting the proceedings is determined by the proverbial coin flip. And with the opening statement, here's Congressman Jim Renacci.
Good afternoon. I really want to thank the City Club for hosting this debate and Tom Barris for serving as our moderator. I'd also like to thank my opponent for being here today and for all of you for coming out to hear two different visions for Ohio's 16th District. Most of all, I want to thank the people of Ohio's 16th District for allowing me the opportunity to represent them in Washington. As some of you may know, I grew up in a blue-collar union family. I was the first in my family to graduate from college, and I paid for it myself by working several jobs. After graduating from college, I started my own business. I went on to create more than 1,500 jobs and employ more than 3,000 people here in Ohio. America afforded me this opportunity. America is about opportunity. This election is about restoring opportunity to the millions of Americans who are looking for a job, for those who have given up looking for work altogether. This election is about whether or not you want a bigger federal government, one that spends too much and hands down job-crushing regulations to small businesses. As a CPA and former business owner, I know that Washington doesn't always have the answers. In fact, many times they create the problems. I went to Washington because I was concerned about the direction of this country was heading. Today I am frustrated with the slow pace of job creation and the dysfunction in Washington. If we want to turn this country around, we need to put forth solutions that will help our small businesses grow and create jobs. We need to work toward a balanced budget, which is one of the reasons I introduced a bill that will require the government to present its true assets and liabilities. We need to lower taxes, scale back burdensome regulations, and unleash the power of American energy. We need to work together in a divided government and find common ground. One of the first things I did when I got to Washington was form a bipartisan work group with my friend John Carney, a Democrat from Delaware. Our group meets regularly. We have introduced several bills on issues ranging from veterans to budgets to regulatory reform. Many of these bills have become law. This past week, one of our bills, the Flexibility to Promote Reemployment Act, was just introduced by Senator Portman in the Senate. Another bipartisan solution to help get our workforce back to work. Working together is important. Not once in my 30-year career did I ever look to my left or to my right to to see if I was working with a Republican or a Democrat. What mattered was what was in the best interest of the organization. And what matters to me now is what is in the best interest of Ohio's 16th district. As long as I am in Congress, I am committed to changing business as usual in Washington, and I will continue to work on your behalf to put forth policies that will allow us to pass on a better America with more freedoms and more opportunities for our children and our grandchildren. I am honored to represent the 16th district, and I ask for your vote in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman. Pete Crossland.
Thank you, Tom, and thank everyone who is here and everyone who worked to make this event happen today, and especially thank you, Congressman Renacci, for being here when a lot of incumbents are not really willing to debate their challengers. I respect that you're here, especially since you knew that I was going to be giving some good reasons why you shouldn't be here. I would give some good reasons why I think you're out of touch with the voters of the 16th District and the needs of America. Now, those reasons reminds me of the first reason. And I want to say the first reason and how I came to become a candidate in the first place. Last fall, the government was closed for 16 days. Everyone agreed this is intolerable. Something has to be done. What happened? The leaders of the House and the Senate, the Democrats and the Republicans, came together and forged a compromise to reopen the House. It was supported widely, supported by National Association of Manufacturers, supported by the Chamber of Commerce. And who was against it? Well, the Tea Party was against it, and our good friend Senator Ted Cruz from Texas led that opposition. When I learned that my congressman had voted with these extremists, it was disbelief, really. Like here in northeastern Ohio, I couldn't quite grasp it, and my disbelief sort of turned to irritation. I didn't like it, and my irritation turned to conviction that someone has to challenge this, and that someone turned out to be me. As I see it, there are three clusters of issue differences between us, and I'd just like to outline those. Tom asked us to get right into the issues, so here we go. First of all, there are about 5 issues where my opponent has taken clearly, unambiguously extreme Tea Party positions. Those would have to do with the environment and global warming, with women's health issues, with firearms regulations, with immigration, and with the issue of marriage equality. There's a second cluster of issues that are interrelated, having to do with the economy, jobs, Social Security, Medicare, in which some of the Tea Party extreme views are somewhat disguised. There's some smoke and mirrors, there's some contradictions, there's some errors. These will be more difficult to sort out. The third cluster of issues are ethical issues, and these ethical issues are raised by the Suarez elephant in the room. I thank you very much.
All right. First question. Thank you both. First question for both candidates, and I believe we'll let Mr. Crossland go first. What are your views on the subject of corporate inversion? We've got an example here in Northeast Ohio, Eaton Corporation buying a smaller firm in Ireland, moving its corporate headquarters there for tax benefits because of the lower tax rates. I believe they'll be saving about $160 million, according to several reports. Should corporations that do that still be eligible to get federal contracts? Why or why not? And are you in favor of Congress acting expeditiously to significantly lower the corporate tax rate?
Well, first of all, the inversions are not a very good thing, obviously, and a lot of my friends are saying no more Burger Kings. And I do know that there are proposed legislation to make the inversions more difficult. Certainly, corporations have to have the freedom to do what they have to do, and so I don't say that that should be totally outlawed, but I don't think that should be easy and without penalty, because it obviously has a cost to all the American people. We lose revenues. So inversion is a problem, and it's not out of hand, but it may get there. We do need to keep an eye on it and do what we can. As far as lowering the corporate tax rate, another big question, I think that's a great idea as long as you can, and it is needed, as long as you can get rid of all the various loopholes and exceptions and so forth, and come up with a package that works for everybody, that does not really hurt revenues. So inversions are bad things. A need to reform the whole tax structure, not just the corporate structure is there, and it's something we need to address.
Should corporations who do this still be eligible for federal contracts?
That's a question I didn't answer, and I'm not sure about it. I think there might be some limitations on it, but basically I think there should be.
All right, Congressman.
Well, when it comes to inversions, quite frankly, what we need to have our corporate taxes simplified. We have a complicated tax code. I sit on the Ways and Means Committee. I can tell you that it's the easiest way to stop inversions is to make America more competitive. Make America a place that businesses want to come and stay. The problem today is we have the highest tax rate in the world at 35%. The next highest is 25%, and that rate's going down. We have regulations that cost almost 10% to our companies. So you have companies that look at their books and say, I can save 20%, and that's the National Association of Manufacturing statistic. I can save 20% by moving to another country. We need to change that. We need comprehensive tax reform. We need to reduce our rates down to be competitive. We need to move forward and make sure that we can also simplify our tax code, not only for corporations, but also for individuals. I've worked alongside Republicans and Democrats in the House on the Ways and Means Committee. We've worked very hard to put together a plan to bring down those rates. We do have to eliminate loopholes and to be able to bring down those rates, but at the same time, we have to make America the place that you want to do business and you want to be here. And the best way to do that is reduce our tax rates, make our system less complicated, and really look at some of these regulations that are really job-killing and making many of these businesses go overseas.
All right, a question for both of you. Congressman Renacci, you'll go first. President Obama has once again proven that there's no problem so big you can't run away from it and postpone it. Delayed action on the immigration issue till after the election. I don't think most members of Congress were all that upset by delay, but I'd like you both to describe the key elements of an immigration reform package that you could support, and tell me what industries or interests in the 16th District you think are most interested and concerned and would be most impacted about reforms in the immigration policies.
Well, that is a great question. I do think our immigration we do have a problem with immigration. We have to fix our immigration process. Fixing it is complicated too. The number one issue, absolute number one issue, has to be border security. One of the reasons I do not support the Senate bill that was passed is because border security wasn't even addressed until 2023. That has to be the number one issue. Number two, when it comes to immigration, we have to look at a stronger E-Verify system. I was in the business world. I understand that the I-9 form doesn't mean much if you don't have a verification to determine whether that individual is legal or not, whether they have a Social Security or not. We need to strengthen the E-Verify system. We also need to look at worker programs, and we need to strengthen those programs. You know, I've had the opportunity in the last 3.5 years to either sit next to somebody who has come to America on a legal basis, who has had to go through the process. I remember being on an airplane one time, and the individual said, Congressman Renacci, please don't let people get ahead of me. I've been doing this for 9 years, and I'm still not a citizen. I believe that those people that are here legally should have the opportunity, and they should have a way to get there, but I also believe they need to get in the back of the line and get behind the people that have done it legally. We have companies throughout Northeast Ohio that especially, I look at Wayne County, and Wayne County's a necessity in the farming area. We need to have a strong immigration program, but we need to make border security the number one issue. And once we can secure our borders, we can move forward with the E-Verify and the worker guest program. Thank you.
So you would support a program that included a path to citizenship for those who have been here working, paying taxes a long time, but perhaps illegally?
Absolutely. There has to be a path, but the path has to be they get back in line just like those that have already been in the path. I do not believe they should step in front of anyone.
All right. Mr. Crossland.
That was a surprise. First of all, I would have supported the Senate compromise. And one of the great things about the Senate compromise was it was an example of true bipartisan give and take. Now, I don't think it was perfect, and probably each side of it didn't feel they got everything they wanted, but at least it worked. And it was supported widely. It was supported widely by the business community, the Chamber of Commerce, and so forth. So to oppose that would have been to go against what business wanted and needed. They recognize the immigration issue has to be settled. And it's not going to be settled. None of these issues are going to be settled by one side getting everything they want. The problem with Congress right now is there's too much of this, I want the whole package or I'm not going to go for a compromise. You've got to compromise when you have a country as divided as we do. Secondly, what surprised me, I have a statement here, quote by Congressman Renacci, I am 100% opposed to amnesty for illegal immigrants. The U.S. should never be in the practice of issuing any form of legal benefits to those who first act in our country is to violate federal laws. I don't know if you've changed that completely. It sounded like you just have. But that is a terrible position to take because it does not only act to hurt individuals and cause all kind of problems, people who came here as children, and it also hurts the business community who needs these employees. Thank you.
All right. Question specifically for you, Mr. Crossland. Could you pick maybe 3 highlights or real, tangible, significant achievements from your career as a state lawmaker and a Summit County council person that you could say made a difference? And a second question here, to those unenlightened people who may have raised eyebrows and say, hey, this guy's going to be 77 years old if he wins and he's sworn in, what do you say to them?
Well, I'm going to need more than 90 seconds to respond to all that. I'll take the last thing first. Am I too old to do this? Do I look too old? How old is the Pope? How old are many leaders of Congress? How old is the Supreme Court? Actually, I would argue that I'm younger than Congressman Renacci, at least in my thoughts, because his economic views go back to, Adam Smith a couple hundred years ago, and his views on the environment and women's issues and marriage equality and so forth are way out of date. So that's how I answer the age question. Now, the second question was, or the first question.
First question, sorry to confuse the issue here.
Yeah,
three achievements from your state legislative career
okay.
and career on the Summit County Council that made a difference.
Well, I would say some of my best work was done as the chairman of the Ohio House Human Services Committee, where I worked through on 2 cycles, $3 billion of appropriations. My time is up, but I'll be glad to come back to that.
25 seconds. You have
I have 30 seconds. Sorry, I looked at the wrong card. Okay, so my work in human services, and that was a place where I was really working and doing true bipartisan work. We had a committee, and we had a lot of people come in and testify. We worked hard on it. I spent one time many hours working on it, and now I have to stop.
thoughts if you have some.
My career? Well, my career, again, if I look back, my best thing is I was married for 31 years. I have 3 children, one of which is here as an attorney. Those are some of the greatest accomplishments. But my next, I would say, in the real world, in the world is I started a business with nothing and actually turned it into a multi-million-dollar business. I employed over 3,000 people, created over 1,500 jobs. When it came to politics, I took over a city that was running deficit spending, and I was able to convert that to a surplus in less than 4 years. I mean, these are accomplishments that I think are very important.
All right, question for both of you. Our roads and bridges, much of our infrastructure is in appalling shape. Federal gas tax has gone more than 2 decades without being raised. It's not indexed for inflation. Should the federal gas tax be raised or perhaps at least adjusted for inflation to generate some money to fix our roads and bridges? And if not, where should the needed money come from? Congressman, you go first.
Thank you. I think that's an important question. Look, I do believe that one of the jobs of the federal government is roads and bridges. We need to come up with a solution. I was very frustrated just a month ago when the House Ways and Means Committee voted to do what I call an accounting gimmick to get us through 5 or 6 months. One big problem I have in Washington is gimmicks. We have too many gimmicks. One of the reasons, I go back to what my opponent said about not voting to reopen the government, there was a reason there. It was a gimmick. Another gimmick that only lasted 9 weeks. We don't need gimmicks, we need solutions. When it comes to the highway plan, we need to be able to come up with a plan. Not only though, should that plan make sure that it takes care of gasoline vehicles, we have to take care of electric vehicles, we have to take care of natural gas vehicles, we have to take care of all users of the highway. So my opinion is that we have to work real hard. I can tell you right now, my staff is working, because I said in Ways and Means, I would not continue these gimmicks going forward. We have to have a plan. But one thing I've learned in Washington, you can't just say you have to have a plan, you have to have that plan. And I think we need to do a number of things. We need to look at the gas tax. That is the easiest way to bring in some dollars and the simplest way. But we also have to look at a system that allows us in many ways to take care of all users of the roads and bridges. And I plan on actually coming out with a plan to help have the answer, because roads and bridges are probably one of the most important things this federal government needs to do. It will stir job growth, and it will continue to make sure that those roads and bridges are safe for all of us. Thank you.
So you would approve of increasing the federal gas tax, yes, no, or maybe?
I would approve it along with many other things so that we would have a total, just not gas tax. We have to be able to make sure electric cars and all vehicles are taken care of. But there has to be some fee. And right now, I think the simplest fee might be a look at the gas tax.
All right. Mr. Crossland.
I believe you just said that the legislation to end the shutdown was a gimmick, therefore you voted against it. There was $24 billion damaged to the economy in those 16 days. It was a gimmick. I think the gimmick was the other way around, to find a reason to vote against it. If you had prevailed, then we would have had much greater loss to the economy, more jobs than it lost, and so forth. That just appalls me. Gas tax. Yes, the gas tax should be raised. The gas tax is over 20 years old. It should have been adjusted for inflation in the first place. So if we're going to take care of the bridges and highways, we have to have a revenue source. That's the one we have. And of course, it does have to be considered in context with everything else, but I would favor setting it at a level that will allow us to support our bridges and our highways, and then to tie that to inflation. Now, this whole thing, the gas tax or any other revenue source or any other expenditure, has to be on the table as we try to get to government stability. We don't have government stability, and I hope we can talk some more about how important it is to have government stability. When the U.S. Congress approved spending to start in October 1, last week. It's crazy.
All right. Congressman Renacci, question specifically for you. Most of us have heard and read your name in connection with the Ben Suarez campaign finance trial. He was acquitted of all but one count. No one in your office or your campaign was charged with anything. But I believe a lot of people are uncomfortable with what the president might call the optics of the situation. You wrote a letter to Governor Kasich asking him to write a letter to California's governor to perhaps get some of the officials out there to call off the dogs in the Suarez case. Your campaign got $100,000 of donations, which you ultimately returned. Explain your version of what happened and what you say to those who think there is an ethical, if not a legal, problem here.
Well, it's interesting because, again, as you said, my office, myself, we're never part of this. We work very closely with the Justice Department to make sure that they had all the documentation. It's interesting also. Campaign finance is very, very interesting. You get dollars in, the campaign handles it. The official staff in my office, I can tell you, has no idea what campaign donations are coming in. They react based on everybody's request. So no matter what, when somebody asks for anything, it doesn't have to be legislation, although I'll give you a perfect example. I had an individual from Stark County ask me to put a piece of legislation together to eliminate Medicaid fraud and abuse. That now is a piece of legislation that we do promote, and we have dropped, and we do have co-sponsors on both sides. When it came to the Suarez, he actually asked us to do something with a piece of legislation, and we told him we couldn't. It was a state issue. And like we do with everything, we refer it on. If it's one thing I guarantee you my office does is they refer things on. If we can't answer it, we refer it on to the other, the body. We believe this was a state issue, and quite frankly, this thing was litigated over the last couple of years. It was brought up in my last campaign. But it's interesting. I think what American people need to do is look at others. President Obama, multiple campaign violations. Hillary Clinton, multiple. 3 people serving in prison over Hillary Clinton. We do have issues with campaign finance, but the reason we do is because people get aggressive to donate. The best thing you can do is keep your staff separated like I have, where my campaign staff and my official staff absolutely do not know.
So you're saying there's no correlation, but would that letter have been written to the governor if there had not been campaign contributions happening simultaneously?
Well, absolutely. We would have written a letter. Whether it was that issue or other issues, you can check. Our office responds to everybody. If they ask us for a letter, we follow up with a letter if we believe it's appropriate. If it's something we can't handle, we'll follow up with a letter to whatever agency we believe should.
All right. Mr. Crossland.
Well, I think that the whole Suarez thing is incredible, and I was amazed to hear, if I heard you correctly, Jim, say that you have the office that does government business and you have your political side and never they meet. I believe one person is in charge of both sides, and I can't believe that anybody would ever make any. I know when a person gives me campaign contributions, my treasurer lets me know that right away so I can thank them. I'm sure you were very well aware of it. Stop already? I've got more to say. Thank you.
All right. Question for both of you. Give me your assessment of whether the Affordable Care Act has done more harm or good to the people and businesses of the 16th District. Please be specific. Mr. Crossland, would you be in favor of any modifications of the act as it now exists? And Congressman Renacci, what is the benefit of voting more than 50 times to overturn it beyond the dramatic symbolism? Mr. Crossland.
Thank you very much. Affordable Care Act is a mixed bag. It needs some repair, but my goodness, it has helped enormously. 14 million people now have access to health care that didn't have it before. Had a report from how this affects our district. In the 16th District, there are 12,000 people who now have access to health care, have health insurance that didn't have it before, and you're going to look to them. That's a group that's about the size of City of Medina voters, and you're going to say, hey, I'm going to take that away. That's wrong. That hurts not only those individuals, but it hurts the economy, hurts our country. So I want to say that Affordable Care Act is partly working very well. There's 25% less people uninsured than there were before it was put in. Now, on the other hand, it's not perfect. The administration has recognized that. The regulations having to do with business have been delayed for a year in their implementation, and that's a good thing. I think these details can be worked out. Ultimately, there are other problems, and we could talk about the Affordable Care Act all morning probably, but there are other problems that can be addressed, but I don't think we'll ever really get sensible until we have a single-payer system that will cover everyone. Thank you.
All right. Hold the applause, please. Congressman Renacci.
Well, it's interesting. I'd like for my opponent someday to come around the 16th District. First off, the 16th District, the majority of people in the district do not agree with the Affordable Care Act based on polling that we've had. The other thing that's very important, I'd like him to look at the eyes of the woman, Bob Evans, who said to me, Congressman Renacci, please change this. I've just been cut back down to less than 30 hours. I now have premiums that I can't afford, and guess what? I have a deductible that I'll never be able to pay for. The Affordable Care Act has also added much burdens to the business community. We've lost employees because of the Affordable Care Act. Look, this is something that needs to be replaced and repealed. There are some good things in it, I will say that. Here's what the problem is. This president who has said, give me some solutions. I was one of 33 members of Congress who said, Mr. President, we have some solutions. He's never responded. I will also tell you that I've co-sponsored multiple bills to fix the Affordable Care Act, multiple bills. And you know what the president said on every one of those? I will veto them. I have a Democrat friend, as I told you, John Carney. He has a bill out there, a Democrat. He asked me to come down on the House floor and support him. A very simple fix to the Affordable Care Act. You know what the others on his side said? They said, we will not change that, because if you change that, you're going to start changing other things. So you can't have it both ways. You either have to replace it or repeal it, or you have to fix it, but you can't do nothing. The problem with the Affordable Care Act, it's hurting job creators. It's hurting those people in the middle class that are working hard, that are barely making ends meet, and they are the ones that are going to end up paying in the end.
Okay, and the value of the multiple 50-plus votes to overturn it?
Well, again, I don't think there were 50-plus votes to overturn it. There were 50-plus votes to change it and repeal it.
Yes.
And I believe that the American people want it replaced and repealed. The polls out there show over 52% of Americans are unhappy with it. And again, polling in the district shows the exact same thing. I represent the Ohio 16th District. I believe that the Ohio 16th District is important, and what their opinions are important to me.
All right. I think perhaps this will be the last moderator question.
We're going to do the break right now.
No, the break right now. That was the last moderator question. All right. All right. Time out. We'll return with your questions.
You know the problem with this? It's already.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are enjoying a special program debate between Ohio's District 16 congressional candidates, Pete Crossland, the Democrat, and Jim Renacci, the Republican, moderated by Tom Barris. We will return to our speaker momentarily for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We encourage you to formulate questions for our speaker now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here and those joining us via our live webcast sponsored by the University of Akron. Be sure to tune into our Friday forums on 90.3 WCPN, WVIZ PBS, 104.9 WCLV Idea Stream, or one of the many radio stations across the region and country that carry City Club programs. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. On October 3rd, the City Club welcomes Ann D. Neal, President and co-founder and American Council of Trustees and Alumni, to discuss political correctness and the problems for academic freedom. For more information about our upcoming and past forums, please visit us online at cityclub.org. Today's debate is sponsored by the Northeast Ohio Media Group and City Club sponsor of Politics and Policy Programming. We thank you for your support. Our community partner for today's program is the Center for Health Affairs. We thank you for your support. Today we welcome guests at tables hosted by the Brecksville Broadview Heights High School, Cuyahoga County GOP, the Oswald Companies, Pete Crossland for Congress, Philpott Rubber, Renacci for Congress, Squire Patton Boggs, and the Center for Health Affairs. We thank you all for your support. Now we'd like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are Director of Programming, Stephanie Jansky, to my right, and Marketing and Outreach Specialist, Kirsten Pianka, to my left. First question, please.
All right. Same request. Please address to both or one particular candidate. And let's start with Kieran's questioner here.
This can go to both candidates. I have a question regarding retirement security. Many people over the last decades, particularly during the financial collapse, have become unemployed, have had to steal from retirement accounts to pay for ongoing expenses for aging parents, children in college. What are your ideas helping people to have better financial security in retirement?
I think Pete's first on this one. Pete?
I'm not just sure which people you're talking about, but I would just address the issues of Social Security and Medicare, if I may. I think those are pretty basic questions to anybody's life when they're retired. Our major differences about this is that I think Social Security and Medicare should remain intact, that there should not be any form of privatization of either. My opponent has come out for some form of privatization. That's the kind of thing that chips at a safety net. The safety net is there. You know, when we hear safety net, we often think, well, that's for the poor people. No, it's for the middle class and for even wealthier people, because so many people do depend on Social Security and Medicare, and to weaken those programs in any way by changing them and partially privatizing them would be a disaster. It's really an attempt to repeal the New Deal. Some of you may have watched the series on the Roosevelts, and we saw what happened when we had a huge recession. And I think that when we have a huge recession, the government needs to be able to act upon it. And certainly we need to continue these programs to make sure that they're in place and in a strong way when that happens, and even when it doesn't happen.
Hold the applause, please. Given the budgetary issues, might you be in favor of any modifications of Social Security, such as pushing back the eligibility age, or maybe decreasing or eliminating benefits for very well-to-do seniors?
Okay, when I said the latter part, yeah, I'm open to that. I wouldn't mind having my benefits reduced just a little bit, even though I'm not, you know, wealthy compared to my opponent.
Zing.
Yeah, I think obviously there has to be some adjustments in those programs,
right.
And I think there's room. I think removing the cap on the payroll tax would be a major, easy thing and fair thing to do.
All right. Congressman.
Well, first off, I would tell you that, again, to get back to your question, we have a lot of issues. We have 401k plans, we have Medicare, we have Social Security. All of those issues need to be looked at. We need to make sure we have a strong 401k plan system. I can tell you that we're working on that in the tax reform. You have to have multitudes of ways to be able to save, going back to your pensions. We need to be able to make sure pensions are secure. We need to absolutely look at how pensions are being funded and make sure they're secure. When it comes to Medicare and Social Security, look, if we do nothing, like my opponent says, the New Deal will be gone anyway. 2033, Social Security will not be able to pay out benefits. 2026, Medicare will be insolvent. These are issues that many people who don't want to make the hard choices don't want to talk about. But we have to make sure they're around forever. We have to make sure they're around for our future generations. But to do that, we have to make sure we realize that the programs that are set up were set up based on people dying at age 65, 41 years ago. And because people are living longer, we have 10,000 people retiring a day starting in 2010 without making sure we revise these programs and make them so that they're strong enough to go on for our future generations. They will be insolvent in 2023 and 2026. At the same time, that's where I think pensions and 401ks have to be strengthened to help with that retirement burden.
So modifications to Social Security you think are worth exploring? What kind of curtailment?
Absolutely. I got on TV with another one of my Democratic colleagues during the shutdown, and we talked about modifications to Social Security. It's a very simple fix. There could be a number of things done, and I think it's important that we look at that. Those fixes, though, we should make sure that we don't hurt those people that are close to retirement now. We should look at those, and if you look at some of the plans that are being discussed, 55 and older, those benefits should stay. People have worked their whole life to be able to collect that Social Security check and have that Medicare. But we have to make sure it's available for those under 55 by modifying some of the programs.
All right. Next question. Mary Boyle.
Here we are about 4 blocks from Lake Erie, not in the congressional district, and I am grateful that both of you agreed to come and debate about this important race. But I know, Mr. Crossland, in your opening remarks, you mentioned in your category of issues that environmental issues are important. I'd like you to take a few minutes to tell us about the importance of environmental issues in that particular congressional district. What would you like to see happen in Congress? How would you see going about doing that?
Okay, I'm first.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I've been a long time a member of the Sierra Club, and I do consider myself an environmentalist. Sierra Club rated my opponent as toxic, named 6 congresspeople who had the worst records on pollution. That's pretty damning. The second thing I would mention about the people of the 16th district and the people of every district is that global warming is real. Now, I don't know whether Congressman Renacci believes it's real or not, but he has said, and I hope he's changed his mind, it was several years ago, he's on YouTube, where he says, actually, I don't care what scientists say, but I think the government should not be concerned or get involved in issues of global warming. That is a terribly scary way to look at it. And, you know, we do have climate deniers. If any of you read the newspaper the other day, just 2 days ago, a new report has come out showing that how much carbon is increasing in the air and, you know, the kind of damage that's going to do. So we have to find ways to reduce the carbon, and we have to find ways to slow global warming. And it may be tough for the coal industry, and we have to find ways to help make those transitions, just like we found ways to make a transition away from so much production of tobacco. But it's really important to take good care of the environment.
All right, Congressman, briefly, your thoughts on the environmental challenges in the district.
Well, I think we have to make sure that we always are concerned about the environment. But the other thing we have to make sure we are is concerned about the 16th District and Ohio. When it comes to cap and trade, I know my opponent just reaffirmed his commitment to cap and trade. Think about cap and trade. I've always said anybody who runs in Ohio, anybody who runs for Congress in Ohio that supports cap and trade should never get to Congress. Ohio, almost 80% relies on coal. When we have clean coal, they rely on that energy source. So what my opponent is saying is, you know what? We don't have an all-of-the-above strategy because we're going to eliminate coal. I'm a believer in the all-above strategy. The all-above strategy includes coal. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next question, please.
Hello, Mr. Renacci. As a business professional and a fellow CPA, I'm often frustrated to try to plan and make decisions as Congress continues to pass short-term extensions on highway funding, tax extenders, and dealing with the debt ceiling. What do you think should be done to stop this pattern on kicking the can down the road and have some long-term improvements?
Oh, absolutely, and that's a great question. And as you know, I am opposed to these short-term gimmicks. As we said, when we reopened the government and my opponent said I voted against it, I came out with a statement that said the reason I voted against it. It was a gimmick because it was only 9 weeks. Think about it. We're going to put 9 weeks on a reopening of government and a debt ceiling. We should fix this stuff permanently. When it comes to roads and bridges, we should fix that permanently. When it comes to tax policy, we should quit just extending things for a year, and we should make permanent extensions. Think about it. We have extenders in the tax policy that are extended year after year for 23 years. I call that permanent. I call that permanent. We need to make sure businesses have certainty and predictability. I'm for eliminating these gimmicks. I'm for eliminating short-term 9-week, 10-week extensions. You're darn right. I'm going to continue to vote against any gimmick that comes forward in this Congress, which is a 9-week gimmick or a 3-week gimmick or a 5-week gimmick. We need long-term solutions. We don't need short-term gimmick solutions.
Mr. Crossland.
Well, we certainly do need long-term solutions, but the gimmicks are not gimmicks, they're patches that are put on. What's the alternative? To let the economy go to hell? I can't believe that we aren't more concerned about stability of government. And I think that the Tea Party people do not understand that a stable government is very important to make the economy work. When we have a series of crises, and my opponent has, in many cases, I thought I had more time. I'd like to speak more of this. I'll pick it up later.
All right. Next question, please.
This is for Mr. Renacci. A few minutes ago, you cited a woman who you said had some catastrophic consequences from the Affordable Care Act. Several such instances have been cited in the news, and when further investigated, it was found that the claims were simply untrue, or it was a result of a misunderstanding that was easily cleared up. Would you be willing to make the details of this woman's claim available for scrutiny by the press and so that we can verify the claim?
Oh, absolutely. Woman works at Bob Evans. I mentioned that already. She was cut back to 29 hours based on the Affordable Care Act. She lost her health insurance. She was given health insurance. She actually went on to the exchanges, and now she can't afford the health insurance. So absolutely. If she's willing to talk. I was actually asked by the press at one point in time if I was willing, because I brought this up before. And at that time, she really didn't want to be part of it. But I think what you can do is go talk to some Bob Evans employees, because you'll find that most of them are back to 29 hours. Most of them have lost their health insurance. And most of them, and I just don't want to use Bob Evans as an example, go to many of the small business owners, small businesses like the Bob Evans or like the fast food restaurants.
Unless we can verify that, that example
Well, I mean, there are
unless she's
obviously
willing
HIPAA
to make her
issues
name
here. I mean, you
available.
can't just be putting people's name on Front Street, right?
Well, that's why I told her, if you want, go talk to the employees. I'll take you with me. Come to Wadsworth. We'll go talk. We'll go talk to many employees who have had that situation. See, it's very easy to verify it when you go talk to the people. It's not easy to verify it when you assume it's incorrect when a statement's made. So I'm more than willing to take you to a Bob Evans restaurant right there in Wadsworth, and we'll go around and talk to some of the employees.
Maybe you get a nice dinner out of it anyway, right? You know, so. All right, Mr. Crosswood, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yes, several things. Most of these dramatic incidences of people being really put at disadvantage have not withstood the scrutiny of investigation. Now, here's another part I wanted to mention about Affordable Care Act. Here's a quote from Jim Renacci. While there are several parts of the law I support eliminating the lifetime spending caps. I support preventing insurers from unjustly canceling policies, support closing Medicare Part D donut gap, and support the wellness incentive. Now, those things are big things, and I'm glad you support them, but how can you support them and then turn around and vote against it time after time? And supporting them is supporting the heart of the act without the stuff that pays for it.
Next question, please.
Yes, with regard to health care issues, and protecting Medicare also, do either of you have a plan for controlling health care costs?
Mr. Crossland?
Yes, I don't have a plan that will do it, but there are a number of things that can be done. Some of them are pretty obvious, and it's ridiculous that they aren't done. For example, the inability of the government to negotiate with drug companies for lower prices. You know, the VA has the authority to do that, and they pay only a fraction of what Medicare pays for drugs. That's just one thing. There's also an awful lot of room for saving money in dealing with health care costs by hospitals. Time magazine about a year ago had a whole issue devoted to the way in which billing is done in hospitals. You know, we all have this. You know, you go to the doctor, you go to the hospital, you get a certain amount, and then it has an amount that's adjusted, and if you don't have insurance, you pay more, and we don't really know what the real cost of things are. So there are a lot of things that can be done. We have to look carefully at that. We also have to provide health care to our citizens. Hey, all the other big industrial countries of the world have better access to care than people in the United States. Some people like to say we have the greatest medical system in the world. Well, we do in terms of the abilities that are there to help people, but we don't have the greatest system in the world when you find out how many people are denied health care. We've got to stop that.
Mr. Renacci?
Well, if you want to cut expenses in healthcare, you got to get pretty much the government in many ways out of the way. That's one of the biggest problems. Anytime the government gets in the way, we have costs that are going up. Here's a big issue. I mean, I always say this. If you're going to fix healthcare, bring competition in. You can't buy a healthcare policy in any other state but Ohio here. We should have competition across state lines. That's one thing. Number two, we got to get rid of some tort reform. We got to bring federal tort reform in. I know some lawyers in the room, they probably aren't happy me saying that, but we do have to get tort reform involved. We have to be able and willing to pull businesses together. But the other thing we have to do, quite frankly, is we got to get the, look, the President said every one of your health care plans would go down by $2,500 per year. I wonder how many in this room could put up their hand and say their policies and their health care insurance has gone up has gone down $2,500 per year. I guarantee you there aren't too many. And if there are one and two, you'd be in the very small minority. That's always what happens. But the majority, the costs have gone up. That's what I hear all the time when I'm walking around the 16th district. My costs are going up. My health care is going up. What are you going to do about the Affordable Care Act? The hospital just closed in Wadsworth. That's the Affordable Care Act. Why did you vote for it? They didn't realize I didn't vote for it. But you know what's really sad? That the Affordable Care Act was put together also on a gimmick. Because if you look at the way it was passed, and I didn't realize this, they used a gimmick to get it into the Senate. They stripped a bill and put the health care plan in there, and they passed it with 51 votes. What really should have happened is the American people should have the opportunity to debate the health care system. You now have to live with a system that you had no opportunity to have your input in.
Next question.
Mr. Crossland, thanks for being here today. I'm really concerned about government spending. It seems to be, the administration just seems to be reckless at times. And from what I sense, you support building more programs, more spending, and if you could share your thoughts on bringing down the nation's debt. Thank you.
Bringing down the debt, yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. The debt is a serious long-range problem. We do have to bring it down. There's only one way to do that, and it's very much tied to the whole problem that we have of not having a federal budget. What we have to do, what is necessary in Congress, is for leaders to sit down and go over every expenditure and every tax thing and come up with some kind of system that balances. Everything should be on the table. People who come in and say, I will never raise a tax for any reason, they are just trying to disguise the fact that they really want to narrow the government down, privatize things, go back a long way and destroy government. This is a huge threat to the American economy, that we are unable to even make a budget. And when we can make a budget, then we can start to think about making budgets that are rational and work in the long term. Well, I think I got a few seconds left, but I'll finish it then. Thanks.
Congressman.
My opponent should come join the Republican Party. We've been saying that for many years. You know, it's interesting. The House was Democratic controlled. They didn't pass a budget. The Senate is Democratic controlled. They didn't pass a budget. The House has passed a budget every time since I've been in Washington. The Senate finally passed a budget. You know why? Because we told them no budget, no pay. There, I agree with him, and I think he agrees with the Republicans. We do need a budget. We need a budget that brings down and balances. I support a balanced budget. We have to work as hard as we can to get to a balanced budget, not today, but long term.
I have my 20 seconds back.
All right. Thank you, audience, for your questions. Final moderator's question and some walk-off comments here. What will it take to change Congress from the unpopular, unproductive body that it is now into the kind of solution-based legislature it was intended to be? What needs to be done to make sure the next Congress is not an instant replay of this rather, by any measurement, underperforming Congress? Talk about the leadership, the structure, the parties, and what individual congressmen can do, what you would do if you're sent back to Congress. If you're not part of the answer, you're part of the problem. Congressman.
Well, that's a very good question. And let's face it, the problems in Washington are not Republican problems or Democrat problems. I've said that all along. The problems are American problems, ones we have to work together on. The biggest problem, though, is when it comes to going to Washington and the party system. You know, there are members in this audience that disagree with me no matter what I say. I've said that all along. They're going to disagree just because of the party. 99% of it just because of the party. I run into people all the time who say, and I always use this story. It's an interesting story. I was on an airplane. Some of you might have already heard this story. I sat next to a woman, and I said to her, she was bashing Congress. She was talking about how bad Congress was. And I said to her, ma'am, I'm a U.S. congressperson. You could say whatever you want, but I just want you to know. And you know what she said? The question should be, what do you stand for? You know what she said? Are you a Republican or a Democrat? What kind of question is that? I said, I'm a Republican. You would have thought that I just lit a stick of dynamite. She said, you hate Medicare. You hate Social Security. You hate women. By the way, I have a wife, a daughter, and a mother. I don't hate women. But I said to her, you know what the problem here is? You're the problem. You are the problem because you have not recognized that problems are not Republican and Democrat issues. They're American issues. We have to be able to work together. One of the things you know I've done is I've got a bipartisan working group. That bipartisan working group works on a regular basis. 15 pieces of legislation have come out of that bipartisan group. 5 have become law. I think that's important. One of the things we got to do in Washington, we got to learn to work together. We got to learn to understand each other. But we can't just say, well, he's wrong, or she's right, or he's wrong. Because quite frankly, the one thing I've learned in Washington, there are people that disagree with me, but at least we work together. We need more of that. We need my bipartisan group to go from 10, right now it's 20, to 50, to 100, to 200. The only thing stopping that, of course, for me, is when you get too many people in a room, you don't get much accomplished. But the other thing stopping it in many cases is the leadership. The other side in my group, their leadership will not let them meet with me. When I was running the last 2 campaigns, they had to stay away from me. That's a problem. If we're going to fix Washington, let's get that out of the way. Let's make sure we can work together. I've actually attempted to solve that by making sure I have this bipartisan working group. This group is going to continue to work as long as I'm in Congress, work together, make sure that we can get a vision together to fix what's wrong in America. Let's face it, I started out by saying America's opportunity. I've had that opportunity. I've had the opportunity to come from a poor, working family. I've had the opportunity to grow and become part of the American dream. That is something that I want to make sure everybody in this room and their children and their grandchildren have the opportunity. We have kids here from high school. I want them to have that same opportunity. That's what I'm going to stand for in Congress. That's what I'm going to work for in Congress. And that's what I'm going to do if reelected. Thank you, and I hope that I have your vote.
All right. All right, Mr. Crossland, your website touts you as being pragmatic. Let's hear some of your pragmatic ideas on this.
Okay, thank you. I would first like to comment on the idea of bipartisanship. Congressman Renacci continually presents himself as being a bipartisan person. He has this little bipartisan group. Hey, I play tennis with some Republicans. Does that make me bipartisan? If you look at the voting in the Congress and the degree of which a person votes with their own party, he's out of 234 Republicans, he's the 42nd most Republican, voting 97.5% with the Republicans. A social group in Congress that is there for limited political purposes is not a group that is going to have an impact because they're divorced from their leadership. They're not really involved in the issues that come along. It's important that you get involved with the issues that come along. And you hear talk about needing to come together and forge compromises. Every time that's happened, certain people vote against it, Tea Party people, and they call it a gimmick. Well, that's dangerous because the only real progress, the only problems are solved have been temporary problems on the budget and so forth. But when someone comes along and votes against a compromise to solve the fiscal cliff, votes against reopening the government, continually votes against the whole business of allowing the debts of the government to be paid, to extend the debt ceiling, and then turns around and says, well, I know we have to do this, but vote against it, against it, against it. These are people who are working outside the main channels of communication and policy resolution in Congress. So if I were in Congress, one of the things I would want to do is insist on with everyone that we work hard on the issues, that we engage ourselves in issues like, first of all, to get a budget. And if it's a temporary budget, that's not so good. But if it's a temporary budget, you come to a compromise, and you ought to be for it. And that's, it's, to me, one of the things that I think is so dangerous, really dangerous, and it really scares the heck out of me. The Tea Party is so rigid. They do not want to compromise. They want to do all they can to jam things up and cause government instability. You can't run a government, and the government can't run smoothly to help an economy if you don't know what your budget is going to be for the year. That's just so terribly basic. It scares me that we have a Congress that has been unable to function. You know, I hand it to the Senate because they did work out a couple of things. You know, they worked out immigration reform. They even tried to work out some background check for gun sales. They took a lead in working out temporary budget resolutions. That's what we need, that kind of hard work toward solutions that are the central issues before the bodies. Thank you very much.
All right. A round of applause for the candidates, their remarks, thoughts, and presentations, and for your attention and for your thoughtful questions. Thank you very much.
Today at the City Club, we've been enjoying a special program debate between Ohio District 16 candidates Pete Crossland, the Democrat, and Jim Renacci, the Republican, moderated by Tom Barris. Thank you, Mr. Crossland, Mr. Renacci, and Mr. Barris. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.